Hi, I'm Ted, Hateful Darkblack on the forums, and I'm here today to talk about the new Wave 4 Master, Parker Barrows. For those of you who might not be familiar, hopefully this will be a tutorial so that if you're considering playing him or if you're facing him for the first time, you'll know what to expect. Parker Barrows is a bandit. He is a ranged master that coordinates his crew to shoot things and get resources. He himself has a gun that can drop enemy scheme markers, and I'll talk about that later, burn through upgrades, and I'll talk about that later, and do pretty good damage. He has a lot of what he does, though, is coordinating the rest of his crew. Typically his turn, which might be early in the turn or later in the turn or quite often in the middle, does a lot of stuff and has as much going on his turn as the rest of the turn put together for your crew. He can make friendly models walk. He can, with an upgrade, make them take interact actions, and shoot. He also uses up some resources. So he's got resources that he manipulates in ways that most can't. A lot of what he does is with upgrades and enemy scheme markers. He also manages cards, so he can pull cards if enemy models die. He can gain Soulstones in a whole bunch of ways. One of the things, though, is with upgrades. So whenever he loses an upgrade, and most of his upgrades are things that he has a way of losing, if nothing else by making his guns better by discarding upgrades. Once per turn, when he loses an upgrade, he gains a Soulstone. He also can switch between upgrades if he has empty upgrade slots, which he will because he's burning through his upgrades for other stuff. He can take a 0 action to get an upgrade. That will either cost him Soulstones or enemy scheme markers to take one of his upgrades. He has 7 different upgrades, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but they can make enemy scheme markers blow up, hold up enemies for their Soulstones, move his crew around, shoot into the middle of his own models and scatter them. He can make his guys shoot. He can get resources. He does a lot of his stuff with his upgrades, and he's going to be constantly switching between them depending on what you need. The other thing, though, is that he uses enemy scheme markers as a resource. The best way to think of this is if your enemy is putting down scheme markers, you can gobble them up and turn them to your own uses. If your enemy isn't dropping scheme markers, you can force your enemy to drop scheme markers. Most of the crew have on their guns a trigger that forces the enemy to drop a scheme marker. You can convert the enemy scheme markers to your own to get victory points. Parker can do that every turn. A lot of the rest of his crew can do it at the end of the game if they're still alive. So he does a lot with enemy scheme markers. He can also gain resources when they go away. So that is Parker. And Parker just generally has a lot going on his very coordinated turn. Most of his crew are bandits, and he needs at least a few bandits to really work at optimum efficiency. He can take other outcast models and make them work well as well, but he wants bandits. The one model that's in the box that's not a bandit is his totem. Poor Doc Mitchell. Doc Mitchell is a drunk old doctor who got kidnapped by the bandits and is being compelled to treat them all medically against his will. He has a really bad attack that he's not allowed to use. If he uses his gun attack within line of sight of Parker Barrows, he's destroyed because he's not supposed to have that gun. He can, at the start of his turn, he can discard to push towards a friendly bandit. He's got an action that can heal models and even give them hard to wound on a trigger. He's a pretty cheap 3 Soulstone minion, but he's insignificant. He doesn't have very good attacks. He's kind of fragile, but he's a healer that can move around and take up an activation. Also in the crew box is Mad Dog Brackett. Mad Dog Brackett is a mean hombre. He's got a shotgun that does a bunch of damage and pushes enemy models away. In melee combat, he gets a little bit tied up, but he has an attack that gives burning and has 2 triggers, one that lets him shoot and therefore push the enemy away, and one that lets him do damage and push the enemy away. So if he can get one of those 2 suits that he needs, he can get back into range where he wants to be. He also has a 0 action that does something that nothing else in the game can really do, which is blow away terrain. He can put a blown up marker somewhere, and models within 3 of that don't get benefit from cover. So he can set up the rest of the shooters to be able to ignore one of the main defenses against shooting of cover. So he's pretty handy that way. And that is Mad Dog Bracket. The last model in his crew box are the Banditos. They are 5 Soulstone minions. They've got a decent gun attack. They can, at the end of the game, if they're still around, they can convert scheme markers. Their gun can make people drop scheme markers. The main thing that they've got that's interesting is they have a 2 action where they can push, take a shot with positive twists to attack and damage, and then push again. So they can duck out of cover and back in, or run between one piece of cover and another and take a shot in between. So they are kind of designed to work with the crew. They are a little bit fragile, but have some interesting movement and offensive potential. There are 2 bandits not in the crew box. The first are the Dead Outlaws. They are pretty durable. They've got hard to wound and a little bit more wounds than the bandits. They cost 1 Soulstone more than the bandits, and they can heal themselves when an enemy scheme marker is placed close to them, which can happen all kinds of ways, especially when you force it to happen. They can gobble up the scheme marker to heal 2 damage, which is handy. They have a melee attack that doesn't do a lot of damage, but can do some positioning tricks and slow down the enemy. They can also have a 0 that forces the enemy to have a limited set of actions where they need to go do stuff instead of what they want to do. It's a curse. The last model that can go with the bandit theme are the Wokou Raiders. Wokou is a Chinese word, actually Chinese and Japanese and Korean word for pirates that kind of plagued that area in the 16th century. Wokou Raiders are a very expensive minion model. They cost 8, but they're really, really durable and have a lot of tricks. One of the most amazing things about them is they have something called combat finesse, which no other model has. Enemy models that are attacking their defense in close range cannot cheat. And what that means is they are really, really hard to kill at close range. If you're facing an enemy melee crew, you will probably not see many cases where they die, because they are so hard to kill because they have a high defense and enemies can't cheat that enemies often just don't try. Their melee attack is really strong, and they have a gun attack, which is not bad and lets them reposition a little bit. They also have a 0 action that can place a scheme marker, friendly or enemy, 6 inches away from where it was. This can be handy for setting other things up, for putting enemy scheme markers out of position, for putting your own scheme markers in position. It can also help. You can put it someplace where the dead outlaw can gobble it up, for example. So it is a very high utility ability for a 0 action. And they will often find themselves in the thick of things, surviving anyway because of their combat finesse. So that's the crew. Parker coordinates everything and manages all the resources. Typically on his turn, if you are not doing 2 different things with every action, you're probably doing it wrong. Doc Mitchell heals things and is a cheap activation. Mad Dog blows things up, gets rid of cover bonuses, and tries to stay out of close range. The Banditos are a little bit fragile, but move around quickly and can duck out of cover and shoot and hide again. The Dead Outlaws are more durable models with some ski marker tricks and some really strong gunning. The Woku Raiders will have combat finesse and be almost impossible to kill. They've also got really strong offense and some clever ski marker tricks. This crew typically ends up being a really carefully coordinated crew. You're going to want to have a plan every turn by the time you hit Parker's activation. I hope that makes sense, and hope that this has been helpful. Thanks a lot. Bye.